Let's move into the tasks of procurement professionals. As I mentioned, I want to focus more on this competency side and the role side of procurement professionals in the field and how their roles are changing due to the implementation of technology. Therefore, I will refer back to the metaphor of a soccer commentator. In the past, a lot of professionals were trained as a generalist in the sense of being a buying professional. So they are able to perform many buying tasks. They have an educational background, maybe in procurement, but most of the time in different kinds of fields, and are currently executing the purchasing and supply management profession. These generalists can be compared to a generalist in the soccer commentating field or general sports commentating. It's a person who has multiple roles in the one person. He's commentating the game, but he may be also analyzing how the teams are playing, and he is giving an overview of what's happening. When we look into soccer commentating today, we see maybe that two people are present, one commentator and one analyst. So they specialize in the roles that they perform, where the analyst, of course, holds analyzing capabilities of how the players are playing and what kind of tactics the teams are using, and the commentator is just commentating what's happening in the game. And that's a little bit the same what we see in procurement today. We could say we have an operative buying professional who is basically doing the operative buying activities of ordering or payment processes or expecting the orders. So that's an operative buying person. And we maybe see something like a risk manager. So somebody who is especially specialized in risk management and procurement. So that is what we already observed in some of the companies, that we have specific role profiles and also to this specific role profiles specific competencies. When we move to the future, we see how technology is now influencing this aspect. So here we see that procurement professionals are not only maybe specialized, but they also use technology to perform their task. And we can see this in procurement, for example, for the risk management expert. He has a technology available to analyze the risk or any events within the supply chain. And we can compare this again to the analyst within the soccer metaphor. He may be using a heat map to analyze what kind of strategies or what kind of playing is used by the players or the teams in order to win the game, or who will be tired, for example. And that's in procurement a little bit the same, where we see that a procurement professional who is maybe an analyzing professional or a supply risk management professional has a system available to perform his task, and he will be or she will be at the end still and the person who takes the decision, but the system can support this. So here we see a role profile of combination of task, responsibility, and system support, and therefore we need specific competencies to do this. We have to be sure on one thing. This role metaphor looks now like that every organization needs to employ multiple new employees. That's not true. One employee can have multiple roles. So, of course, an employee has his function description, but in the function description, we can have multiple roles performed by one person. But each role requires different kinds of competencies. So that's very important. Just compare it to myself. Yeah, I'm a professor an assistant professor at the university, and therefore I'm a teacher and a researcher. So I have a teaching role and a researcher role. But for both roles, I have different kinds of competencies, both accumulated to my function as an assistant professor at the university. So we don't need many more people, but we need to allocate specific roles with the right technology support to the different people. And I will come to that in the next steps. Because what are the roles that we need in the future? That may be interesting. And these roles also connect to the technology landscape that we have in purchasing and supply management. The ones that will be most impacting in future are for sure the data analyst or the master data manager. What we also see a lot at the moment is process automation. What we should not forget is something like supplier onboarding management or system innovation scout, who is responsible for improving the systems that we have. And last, we maybe also have a legal specialist. This research was just conducted based on what future roles we see due to the implementation of technology. There may be other roles in the future that are relevant due to, for example, focus on supply chain sustainability question, ESG questions, or innovation management. These roles are now excluded in this research because this is heavily focused on how does technology shape the role landscape within our field. So let's dive deeper into the ones that are very or dominant maybe in the upcoming years. First of all, of course, the data analyst. The data analyst within purchasing and supply management should be able to analyze data or extract data and analyze it for procurement purposes. Later in the course, you will have a little bit an experience on data analysis and procurement, but you will see that this is a very powerful tool within our domain. The master data manager is more focused on preparing the data in order to analyze. So he makes sure that the data is available. And we can also see that these both roles are actually combining in their responsibility. So what's happening here? When we look into the master data management here on the left and the data analyst here on the right, we see that the left side is basically providing us the information we need in order to execute our search questions. So from operational procurement activities or external market data sources, data would be extracted by the master data management, processed and stored into our database. And this database will be used by the data analyst who has maybe a specific request from strategic procurement or strategic purchasing, where there's an information request. Therefore, the data analyst will select the relevant data, prepare the data, analyze and visualize or report it to our strategic procurement department. Thus, this combination of roles allows us to have a strategic decision making based on data analysis support, technology enabled in that sense. But there are other roles. One significant, very important role at the moment is this process automation manager. We see that a lot of, especially the operative running of the procurement process is highly automated, meaning that we use technology, for example, in operative procurement on ordering, payment or expecting orders. But we also see that some parts of the strategic process are more and more automated. And we also see that the use of robotic process automation, for example, as a technology, are actually really impacting this process automation managing role. In the next part, we should not only focus on the internal operation of our own firm, but we should also focus on how our suppliers are working and how we work with our suppliers especially. So basically we will focus on the interface between supplier and buyer. Therefore, we see the necessity of the supplier onboarding manager. Here we see a person who is in the interface between the buying organization and supplying organization, or maybe even later to the selling organization. So what does this person do? He is really needed, or she is really needed, this role is needed to facilitate the communication between suppliers and buyers. We could maybe even call it smart supply chain management, or in our company, smart manufacturing. So we see somehow a smart working purchasing and supply management professional, which we can coin our supplier onboarding manager when we look to the left side of the picture. He will make sure that we have a good connected systems between our suppliers, can enter, for example, our systems in order to identify what the demand of the manufacturing organization is. But we, as a buying organization, may also want to look into the supplier's stock levels in order to find out if we can increase manufacturing in the short run. So the supplier onboarding manager is very necessary when you look into the communication between two organizations which are especially communicating via IT systems. The next two roles which I want to point out are the System Innovation Scout and the Legal Specialist. First of all, the System Innovation Scout. Later in this course you will have a short assignment on this, where you have to find out what kind of systems are actually useful for the organization. And why do we envision a System Innovation Scout? It's very important that the technology used by the organization actually fits the organization. Therefore, the System Innovation Scout needs to have an understanding of the demands of the organization, so what kind of technology system we actually need, and what kind of systems are available externally. So based on the demand of the organization and the availability of the system, he or she could make a suggestion on what kind of system should be used. Nevertheless, the System Innovation Scout should also be entering the external environment and look for opportunities, because not everything should be demand oriented in the sense it's something we really need, but maybe there's something around in the environment where the company did not think of before. Therefore, we need some implementation here. The last role that's mentioned on the slide is the legislation specialist, which is maybe something we did not expect in the first phase of this research. We found out that the new systems that are implemented also have a lot of legislation questions. So how legally relevant are, for example, smart contracts? Or who's responsible after a system takes a decision, for example. So over the term of higher process digitalization, we also need to govern or make sure that these are legally accurate and confirmed. Therefore, the legal specialist in procurement will ensure that. One side note, we also see that the legal specialist is currently really demanded by changing of legislation in, for example, the European environment, where we are looking at the moment heavily into how a corporate sustainability due diligence directive is influencing the responsibilities in procurement, where, for example, the buying organization would be responsible for any environmental concern, social concern, or the governance concern of their tier 1 supplier. Maybe also more. So this is something we can also see as a support of the legislation specialist role. Concluding this short lecture on the procurement landscape, I want to just address that these are the most important roles which are popping up in the upcoming years and maybe also implementing. Therefore, we also educate towards these kind of roles, which includes the data analyst, the master data management, and process automation. And what we especially see is that process automation is something currently developing in this year heavily. So that processes are not running manual, but basically supported by IT systems. The other roles are maybe a little bit more on the sideline right now, but they are coming up stronger and stronger right now. So especially the System Innovation Scout is something that organizations try to implement in order to find out what systems are relevant. When I look into the next part of the lecture, I will first have a small assignment which addresses exactly the System Innovation Scout, but I will explain the assignment in the next upcoming video. Thank you for listening.